Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. Today we have Dr. Suraj Parihar with us and a brief introduction of Dr. Suraj. He has done his bachelor's in life sciences from MDS University Ajmer, Rajasthan and master's in biotechnology from University of Rajasthan, Jaipur. He did a short research position at PGI Chandigarh and then moved to Cape Town in ICGB for his PhD, followed by postdoc in there, and then currently he's an associate professor at University of Cape Town. With this brief introduction, I would like to say thank you so much, Dr. Suraj, for taking time out for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
We always start these conversations by asking that how and when you decided to become a researcher.
So that was, there are many people who played an important role in this journey, but the initial interest started when I was doing training for my master's in PGI Chandigarh, where I joined in the Department of Forensic Medicine and Toxicology. And so I came in contact with one of my senior who gave me some introduction in the lab in terms of how to do an experiment, which most up until now we only learned in books, thinking by reading the text, which not necessarily knowing how this information is coming through. So and that got me interested into the research, and from that onwards, I decided I will be, at least starting from that point onwards, that will be in the lab.
Okay.
And
So the
yeah.
So the first real life research experience which you gained after your master's at PGI is what kept you going up until now.
What kept me going is the value in having in position to know something which is unknown. So basically the new research findings or data which always keep me going.
Nice. So let's start with the first stage of this. After this experience of your research at PGI, the first immediate step was to pursue a PhD. And then what were the key important parameters for you when you were looking for university or places where you would like to pursue your PhD?
So when I was thinking about PhD, I wasn't thinking too much about the research institutions. Obviously, in terms of the very known ones, yes, exactly. We wanted. I wanted that point, but my initial idea was to join PGI for a PhD, and that's where I started. And I eventually got into that. I joined into an ICMR-funded project, and where I worked as a senior research fellow. But after a while, I realized it was a very much a diagnostic-oriented lab, and there wasn't much for me to learn in terms of techniques at that point. It was just the usual diagnostic techniques that was ongoing. Although it has a value in the collection of the samples and that you can analyze later on in terms of what research question of asking. But at that point, I was, let's say, immature in the science to see it. So then I moved to ICGB in New Delhi, where I was actually again joined as a senior research fellow in an immunology group, and with my mentor there, Dr. Pawan Sharma. And after learning, basically, I learned so many techniques and asking a research question in science there. And the idea was to join PhD there, but obviously it was a research institute, which obviously get the affiliations from JNU to get the degree awarded, which was again competitive and a little bit cumbersome for, let's say, register as a PhD student, despite I had CSIR and ICMR JRF fellowship qualified. And then eventually at the same time, the ICGB Capetown component was inaugurated, and I was in contact with Professor Brombacher, who was the director of the immunology group here and the coordinator, and I joined eventually his lab for PhD. So the advantage was I was already having over 2 years of research experience before I joined a lab as a
Mm-hmm.
PhD student. And that helped me going in terms of completing my PhD in almost 3.5 years. And yeah,
So moving from New Delhi to Cape Town, how was
yeah.
that move first, and then the story of the PhD? How did that go?
So move, obviously, in the research environment or a landscape in India, as people usually do PhDs and then they go for abroad for postdocs. And I was having the similar mindset that I'll do PhD in India and then go for abroad, but abroad part came much earlier than the PhD. So I I moved initially, and it was tough initially to settle in a new country where you technically don't know many people. But I was lucky in the sense actually two of my seniors from ICGB Cape Town, who moved 1 year earlier than me in the same ICGB component under with different PI.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in contact with them, so it made it a bit easier. But the fact that you have to establish yourself in a new place, it has its own challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
So we
I
always
would
say,
say it wasn't much difficult apart from the usual away from the home kind of scenario.
mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So that is the thing which is different, because science like fundamentally doesn't change. The research you were doing in India versus the research in Cape Town, the basics remains the same. But when if there is a change in language or cultural differences, that is what gives a little bit of shock whenever you move outside the country.
Yes, despite, I mean, we know we have been studying or studied in English medium of, but coming in the country who speaks English is different because we don't speak English at home much. So
Hmm.
it took some time to be a fluent in speaking in English because you always tend to think in mother language first before you before you answer the question.
So
So
true.
that took some time initially, but yeah,
Hmm.
it passed.
So So you mentioned about the 3.5 years of PhD, where
Mm.
all the skill set you have earned during your research training prior registering as a PhD student that helped you.
Yeah.
So some things which you would like to share about that journey with our audience, that how they can prepare themselves well ahead of committing themselves to PhD.
So yeah, taking my own example, I would say that get yourself familiar with as much as techniques in the research, be it a small or cumbersome or complicated techniques. That will give you an edge over a new PhD student, especially abroad, because uh, even though we have some research-based BScs and MScs, but it's not very uh, commonly available in all the institutions and universities. Most of them come from past courses, and which is basically you have knowledge of textbook and not really in practical knowledge of doing in experiments. Uh, and then you're competing abroad with people who have BSc in research, who have MSc in research, and then you feel a little bit lagged behind in terms of the skill sets that you have or the confidence to perform the essay on your own. Uh, so that will be my advice to get trained in different skill sets and techniques that you can acquire as much as possible at the level of MSc or BSc. And in addition to that, I would also add a bit of now the writing training or skill of writing as much as important for you to perform the experiments and make a good data and everything, but you need to tell that story in terms of manuscript. And that in my experience, many people that I come across lacked, because it's always their boss or supervisor was doing the writing part, and they were not really were involved much except the later stage of the when the draft is prepared and all. So, and I see many, especially our Indian students, struggling in terms of writing abroad also.
Mm-hmm.
Even at the postdoc level. I mean, I won't say obviously some institutions are better in terms of training the students than other, uh, but the level of some of those are in terms of writing is that needs some like honing of the skills.
Absolutely. And I think this is very important. And for all the audience, whosoever is listening to this conversation, that having yourself in a habit of writing, because as Dr. Suraj mentioned, no, it is wonderful to have great experiments performed, data generated, but if you are not communicating them as manuscript with the rest of the world, they are not aware what you have done, and probably someone else is going through the same process. Here comes the idea of scooping also. Like if you are late in communicating your research with the journals and getting it published, then you might feel disheartened. But keeping this aside, still, whatever experiment has been performed and is not been published is technically never happened, because world is not aware of that.
Yeah.
So keeping this mindset whenever you are thinking that you are preparing yourself to PhD or even at any stage of research you are performing, that should be always one of the motivation behind performing every single experiment or even planning part of that too. So, Dr. Suraj, when you started your PhD, how was the ride of the PhD in ICGB campus at Cape Town?
So just to clarify that ICGB campus is also situated within the University of Cape Town campus. So they don't
Okay.
have a separate institution building. So they're basically within the university. And the environment is pretty much university, and the IDM where I'm based now,
Mm-hmm.
which is Infectious Disease Institute, uh, inaugurated long before the ICGB.
Mm-hmm.
And environment, I would say, in terms of PhD was much easier because partly because I was trained,
Mm-hmm.
and 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 partly I had to learn new things, which wasn't so bad in terms of not so bad, but it wasn't so complicated to learn. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
in addition, I was in the lab which was driving, or well, the lab which is known for working on IL-4 receptor alpha signaling in
Oh, nice.
infectious diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the only one who was not working on IL-4 receptor alpha. So I was kind of odd man out, but within the same lab. Uh, uh, and we established actually the uh, TB aspects or TB uh, experimental model in the lab.
Mm-hmm.
And the journey for PhD was relatively easier because of those reasons I just mentioned. And yeah.
Not many people say that, but we are fortunate to
Yes.
have you saying that PhD, the ride was like the journey was easier.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then, making the next choice after award of your PhD,
Mhm.
what were the thoughts which you had and holding on to now for your research aims and goals which you have established for yourself during your PhD?
So during my PhD, I was, as I mentioned, I was odd man out. So was a benefit in one way that when you do your PhD from a lab, you tend to take the same thing forward. And and for other researchers, they don't see you separate from your supervisor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is important that at some point you need to be separate from your supervisor in terms of driving your research interest or research focus, which is
Mm-hmm.
not exactly same as your supervisor, because then you will be competing against the same people in the field, who
True.
is the network basically also of your supervisor and yours. So
Mm-hmm.
I tried to be separate, and luckily, after my postdoc, my supervisor also sort of retired from this field,
Mm-hmm.
and, and then I carry on. I carry on what I was trained for during the PhD and postdoc. In addition, I added two new direction to my research, which is not existing into the institution uh, or in the country much in terms of research uh, exploration. So I have added like immunogenetics and immunometabolic part, which is not present, which is not so much explored in South Africa yet because of many constraints. So I added those and basically driving a separate my own research interest in addition to what I was trained for working with uh, transgenic animals and uh, human macrophages and these kind of things.
Absolutely.
So,
Having these
uh,
bifurcation, or we
mhm,
say that
mhm,
developing your own niche is so important that, as you mentioned, the earlier you start, the better it is for you to
yeah,
establish that niche for yourself for your future. So,
mm.
when you were doing your PhD, what was the goal you set up for yourself, that you want to become a professor, want to teach only, or want to become an entrepreneur, or want to join industry and do things? What were the things which were going on?
So I didn't think that much far in terms of what I want to do. I
Mm-hmm.
just thought that the research keep me going, and
Okay.
I like it because I'm not chasing a target. I'm
Mm-hmm.
chasing something unknown and which
Mm-hmm.
has its own thrill. And in terms of getting the industry, I thought of it to be honest, but then the working environment between industry and academia is very different. The and also I would prefer the freedom of operating, which is
Yes.
luckily not present much in the industries. Maybe at
Mm-hmm.
lower level it's not present much, but higher level may
Mm-hmm.
be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I would be at the entry stage, which probably wouldn't give you much of a freedom in terms of operations.
Absolutely.
And uh, because I was doing that, I had some resources already available or developed some techniques and essay. So I wanted to keep going forward with this. And I'm not much, let's say, I mean, I do some teaching, but it's not my forte in the sense. I
Mm-hmm.
just do I just do teaching in terms of exposing my research interests and focus to the students, and if they are interested in it, then I recruit them as a potential graduate or undergrad students. But yeah, that's the main focus of research, but teaching is my secondary, you can say secondary uh, uh, interest.
Mm-hmm.
I like it when the group is there, then you can teach about what you're doing in terms of what your own research.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, I don't see much point. I mean, this is my opinion. That is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see much point in going through a book and then delivering a lecture. Um, I,
Mm,
it
absolutely.
doesn't
Everyone
interest
has
me
their
at
own way.
all. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
doesn't interest me at all. And if my voice or I don't feel interested, then this whole thing becomes very uh, monotonous and
So
not so
true.
interesting.
We have had our researcher celebrities with, as you said, varying percentages of their interest in research,
Mm, mm,
communicating their research, teaching in classroom, and as you said, academic teaching is different from research teaching
yeah.
because at undergrad level you have to still follow the books and whatever
Mm-hmm.
the textbook, the reference books they are there. But one point also which you mentioned is very important that having that open-mindedness if you are in exploratory field, you don't have to set up the goals early on. You just keep
Mm.
on, as you said, that you were chasing the unknowns and exploring that. Okay, I just know one thing that research is what excites me. I will always be pursuing it. So after your PhD, then the postdoc journey, did that make it more uh, clear or more confirmatory for you that this is now what you want to do in your next step after the postdoc?
I was certain about keeping a career in science or research during the late PhD or just after PhD. And during postdoc, obviously the training part changes a bit because then you're dealing with the supervision of students, then you're dealing with writing the grants, and then you're dealing with writing grants mostly as a co-investigator with your investigator. And basically you're training now more for writing aspect of it in terms of writing grants and how you can win the grants uh, to carry the resources part of your lab and ensure that it function properly. And so that did had an impact because when at the time when I was in postdoc, I did receive some awards or some fellowships which came with the research cost supplements, and
Mhm.
that I have to manage myself as a grant awardee or the postdoc
Nice.
awardee. And that gave me an idea how, in terms of to manage the money, which is usually not enough for the project, but you get most of it out of it within that time frame which is available. So this
Mhm.
kind of training, soft training, I would say you got, we, I got during the postdoc more. As
Mhm.
much as I say the PhD was not so difficult, but the postdoc was not so difficult, but I worked more in postdoc than in PhD.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Because it
it's
gives you more
mm.
independence. So you
Yeah,
have
it will give you
to
more
face
independence. Yes, exactly.
those
And I was
extra
able to run
challenges.
many projects than those projects like your own interest, the side project. Although
Mhm.
you are bound with the research time frame or research project which is funded, but also
Mhm.
work on the side project which actually generate a lot of preliminary data that eventually help me. Even now, when I write the research grant, I have the data already of those some ideas that I had in my mind that time. So
Mhm.
I would say the postdoc was the pivotal in terms of gathering the resources and soft skills and training to basically launch yourself into the uh, early researcher category or whatever we call it.
Absolutely. So, based on your experience, what you can guide our postdocs who are aspiring to become a faculty in some place of this world.
So the guidance will be, I think nowadays postdocs are very smart. At the time, we were not having so much of resources available around. So you have to fend for the things that you're actually looking for. Uh, for postdoc, I would say train students in your capacity as co-supervisor or supervisor, whichever is different institution allows in that category. That gives you a confidence of how to complete a not only research project that you are working, because those undergrad or postgrad students have to finish their so-called thesis also. So to
Yeah.
ensure that they have the enough data or enough
Mhm.
results that's sufficient for the thesis, that you will not gain training for anywhere, basically. That you need to ensure that, okay, now this is enough for PSc or MSc thesis or and try to get the paper out of it as much as possible. I know it's not easy, having said that, but even if you're on the track of getting a paper, because at that point it's not really so much importance that how much more data you will collect to get for a high impact paper. Because as
Mm-hmm.
much as the PIs tend to hold the data and submit paper for high impact, but for
Mm-hmm.
students career wise, if for them even a one first author paper of intermediate impact journal will be sufficient for them to apply and take their career forward as a master's or PhD student at somewhere else in some better places wherever they want to go.
So
And
true.
yeah, and also training in terms of your own training in soft skills, as I mentioned, a lot of writing, grant writing, paper writing. Obviously, during these times, we will be highly, highly discouraged with the rejections and everything that will come through. But eventually, you will feel that you are having fun in writing because now your
Mm-hmm.
skills are changing how to write your story or how you ask for a research grant,
Mm-hmm.
and why would that be important? And always the component of the training people in the research grant is very important because
Mm-hmm.
funders nowadays don't want to give you money to do a science. They want to give you money to also help training the next generation of scientists or researchers coming out from especially low middle income countries. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, but yeah, I think that would be my advice. And get as much as first author papers if you want to stay in academia,
Mm-hmm.
because uh, one of my mentors still says that the PubMed don't lie. So
Mm-hmm.
when they put your name in PubMed, they can see. I mean, there are many people who can talk and they can project many ideas, but the
Mm-hmm.
funders or person who's going to be recruiting you, they will be looking at the outputs that you have generated in recent past, and not necessarily 15 years ago, but recent past. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that will be my advice. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a high impact nature cell science. They
Mm-hmm.
all want to see that are you a person who complete the work or publish, or are you the person who leaves the work in between because it didn't go to nature or cell or whatever.
So true. So having this checklist for all the audience who are in their postdoc phase and looking for the next opportunities, as Dr. Suraj mentioned, soft skills and writing obviously are the things which you need. But as a researcher, postdoctoral training is crucial because here you learn to wear different hats in the same position. You have to become a finance manager at some point of time. If you have your own award, then you have to manage that. You have to manage as human resource manager also, because you are now working with students, managing them, and then there will be conflicts too. So you have to learn. If you in future are planning to have your own group, there will be conflicts, how you deal with them, and also establishing new collaborations, making your research more interdisciplinary, because now we live in a world where an astrophysicist can simply work with a socio-economic aspect of it also. So preparing yourself, including all these things, will help you for your future move. Now, the point which you touched, Dr. Suraj, about the stress of rejected grants,
Mm.
manuscripts, how you have always kept yourself motivated to pursue it further and further and further, and based on your experience, what you can suggest them. For the researchers, stress is almost very integral part of the life.
Yeah.
How to deal with that?
Before I answer that, I forgot to mention one more point for the previous
Mhm.
question is the networking for your
Networking.
collaboration is
Hmm.
absolutely critical.
Hmm.
Mm, because for majority of grant, as you mentioned, nowadays multidisciplinary, and
Hmm.
they don't want to see a single PI driving the grant. They want to see many people involved, and
Hmm.
uh, some aspects are done by A, some aspects were done by B or C, and so forth. So very important is try to make your own network from late PhD to postdoc time, so that these people will actually help you when you will be writing your grants, because those contact will come very, very handy. Those not necessarily have to be your supervisor's contact. Obviously, you will get in touch with those ones, but eventually, when you will be separating or uh, what you call that, when you're making your own niche or bifurcating from that, then you will need or you would require a set of network or the people in that network that will help you and they will aware of your research very much, and it's not just general that someone knows someone. It's like they intimately know your research, and
Mm-hmm.
this will really help because I would say my mentors network, I was able to establish my own collaborations via those and also via other mentors in the field whom I'm not necessarily working directly with them, but I
Mm-hmm.
know the the contacts, or not contacts in that sense, but the collaborators whom you can be in touch with for many grant applications, because they will be asking for who will be your supervisor, who will be your sponsor, because you remember at the early postdoc and transition of early career, so they want to
Mm-hmm.
know the facilities and infrastructure where you are actually hosted. And that will
Mm-hmm.
be usually the director of institutes and these guys, in addition to your collaborative network. So that will be very handy. Uh, and there are some also which will be in your contacts and network, which probably will not like come through as you. Basically, I'm trying to say is you will be knowing them and they will be knowing you from a long time, but
Mm-hmm.
somehow you may not be necessarily working together, but they can
Yes.
put you in the right contact when
Mm-hmm.
you need certain things from certain geographical regions of this world.
Absolutely.
And 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 that's very handy because that can also give you sometimes the resources which you will not get anywhere commercially.
Mm-hmm.
So
So true.
uh,
And
yeah,
that's why having
and
this networking is so
it's,
important.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
very critical. It's very critical for a success of being in academia or a researcher because no one can do alone anything nowadays.
We always say research is the
Oh,
teamwork. No one
yeah,
can say that I have done my entire research in this one room without any other support. It's
yeah,
impossible.
yeah, yeah.
So
And
now
to your
let's
question now, the question was around the
about
stress,
the
right?
stress.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
how you dealt with it, and then based on your experience, what you can guide our next generation of researchers experiencing or going through that pain.
So the stress is an integral part of this field or any field for this matter nowadays. Uh, that the art is how you manage it, and the manage is for me in terms of getting rejections. And so as much as my PhD was okay-ish,
Mm-hmm.
but during postdocs and all or late PhD, I was getting the rejection of my manuscripts that I have done work in during PhDs and postdoc.
Mm-hmm.
And the grants, more painful was the grants because at the time you were a student, so rejection of manuscript doesn't hurt you that much if you're
Mm-hmm.
not honed on particular journal or particular uh, mm, grant or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when as much as it is very painful, I would not look on the first day when I when I would get a rejection. Okay, in the email body you can see that it's got rejected and all that, and that's it. I will not look for it.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of the time, there is a feedback with it,
Mm-hmm.
be a grant application or a manuscript. But sometimes the grant application don't provide feedback, and because of the
Mm-hmm.
huge volumes of the grant, so then I tend to ask the feedback because I need to know where the things were wrong, so that I can improve the application and go some other fund the next time and not using the same application and get rejected again. So that's the one important thing. And in terms of stress management of these comments that you receive sometimes, that sometimes the reviewer also don't understand what you're trying to say. So it's not necessarily They are very harsh, but the story is written in a way that it's not conveying the message that you want to give. Sometimes, like what I can tell you now is much better than what I can write this in the papers, and
Mm-hmm.
that will be the problem. And remember, they're all busy, so they will not be really taking extra amount of time in order to get. So simpler you keep, better it is. And initially, I used to think more complex you make the things it easier and bit better, but I realized that more simple you keep the things, more things will come your way.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in terms of also we think that reviewers are very, irrational in saying these things and this and that. But when you look at those comments after 2 or 3 days, so I don't look very few days, and then I look later on, and then when you read with those calm mind, you tend to pick, okay, he's not completely wrong on these things.
Mm-hmm.
My application or my paper doesn't have this thing, and based on
Mm-hmm.
that, I cannot be concluding that this happens via that or that. So things will started to make some sense, although it's not 100% always it is, but some comments you will get because the reviewer never understood what you wanted to say.
Yes.
So so uh, so my formula for having less stress is like uh, I don't look at the rejection in terms of face value.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I go over time on it and then improve and go elsewhere. I mean, it's not necessary that if you go elsewhere, it won't be rejected. It might be rejected again, but it teaches you a very important lesson that what you should be doing
Yes.
rather than what are you doing.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 yeah, so I
Keeping
mean,
yourself
yeah.
positive is very important and
Yeah,
looking
so you
at
you
all
need to
those
keep going.
rivers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you can
Looking
have
at
10 rejections, it's fine, but 11th
Mhm.
one might be successful. But
Yes.
if you're not applying, then
Mm-hmm.
just because somebody rejected something and now you're not going to that journal ever again, it's just pure by chance. It's nothing
Absolutely.
against you. It's nothing
Mm-hmm.
against you as a human. So
And I
there
think
is a
being a
room for
researcher,
improvement, even though when we think we know
exactly.
everything, and
Yes.
even the best of the best applications don't get funded, and worst of the
Yep.
worst can get funded. So it's the game that you are in, and you put
Yes.
yourself in that game, and
Yeah.
and the perk of this is there will be rejections coming your way lifelong. So
Mm-hmm.
coming
Absolutely.
in the beginning, it will look bit harsh, but as
Mm-hmm.
you mature in this field, you
Mm-hmm.
won't see as a rejection as a rejection. You'll say,
Yeah.
okay, let's do it this way or
Then you
that way.
start looking them
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
comments and then with
yeah,
more
and the comments, yes,
open-mindedness.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's the best way to keep yourself motivated as well as the group going so that nobody feels the burn of that.
yeah. I have
It's
a
like,
rejection on my table now, so I have not looked at it yet, but I'm sure it will be okay.
nice, nice. That's if you can, be happy with that. I think that is the trademark of a perfect researchers. I'll say that whosoever is watching this conversation, this is how you should always, because this is, if you have this mentality, this positive attitude, that ensures that every day when you are waking up, you are ready to go to lab without stress, but towards learning something new and developing something. That is what is required for all of us. In
Yeah.
our conversations, we always say that if you want to be contacting our researcher celebrity today, Dr. Suraj, you can write to him if you want STEM for Society to help you, to support you, because you are one of those researchers who are passionate about their research, and research makes you happy.
Mm.
We are there to support you in all the possibilities what we have, like either keeping you in touch with our researcher celebrities, or if you are seeking mentorship from our celebrities, we are there to support you. With this, we'll say thank you so much, Dr. Suraj, for taking time out for this conversation.
Thank you for having me and the invitation.
Absolutely. And to all the audience, I can say that stay tuned for another episode of Researchers Celebrity.